Excellent, and welcome to Truth in Telecoms. I'm going to hand over to Johnny because he's got a couple of news items before we get down to our AIT experts.
Yeah, look, before we get on to the AIT, you're down with AIT, OPP, AIT, kind of similar type of song. But yeah, look, news on it, the campaign registry. The campaign registry, people had to put in bids now, blind, all redacted contracts, no, all redacted numbers. The opening bid is $300 million. So there's a bunch of private equity groups and you morons out there. They're talking to me and my guys on diligence. So I think we've knocked out a dozen PE groups, Tata. So just to be aware, um, get on the phone, call your attorneys, clean this thing up. We're going to keep going until you get zero for it. And quite frankly, how is anybody buying the campaign registry with Google and RCS now being lit up? It's on my phone, works good. What, Google's going to need you? So, look, I wanted to just point out that good news. Oh, and by the way, Infobit officially is taking out Cineverse for T-Mobile. The news is around their net. Well, has taken over Twilio Cineverse because I think some traffic started finding its way into the P2P routes. And T-Mobile, tip my hat to them. They're making moves.
Oh
So
yeah, but
hats
also
off
with
to you,
Infobit,
Infobit.
they're also got directs into AT&T and Verizon as well. Is that
I,
correct?
I haven't confirmed that, but I would think
Okay.
one goes, one follow. I mean, T-Mobile
Yeah.
is leading the way. And I remember in my discussions when I tried to buy it, the T-Mobile people, their whole argument was, we don't really need this campaign registry. I mean, you put out the Global Telco Consult report, which now has been banned,
Yeah.
which you should put it out again, because
Hmm.
I was only banned by putting it out.
Yeah.
Um, but look, T-Mobile is a leader. T-Mobile has a $235 billion market cap. They're eating everybody else's lunch.
Oh yeah. No.
They're aggressively making moves here to clean up their network, to clean up spam. They came out with those $4,000 fines. I don't think they know what to
Oh
do.
yeah. But
At the end of the day,
today Infobit did an announcement where it said I have directs with all three major carriers in North America. So in that, those
listen.
also they said claiming they can do approvals, the whole sort of campaign approvals within 24 hours.
Well,
How are
right
they
now,
able to do that?
if you're a customer of Cineverse,
Hmm.
Cineverse sends you to Infobit to approve the campaign.
Yes.
Now, as we all know, the campaign registry is just writing your name on a piece of paper, according to John Wick from Cineverse, right? So that's just
Okay.
a joke of in itself. But yeah, there's something going on with Infobit. I
Gotcha.
think, look, they got JP Morgan, biggest bank in the world behind them, right?
Yeah.
They're out there winning all these awards. They're being aggressive. Uh, I see an IPO. All I read in that press release, and I wrote on their post is IPO, IPO, IPO.
I saw.
So I see the IPOs on the scale. I mean, they're killing it on the short code stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
But
other than
for
that,
the
and
TCR sale, I see what Infobip announced as a big question mark because I sort of go, wait a minute, is
listen,
Infobip?
they're going to try to get a sucker private equity group
Okay.
to buy it, and then the frame job guys, the campaign registry, are going to try to get themselves a cut, just like they did with me when they came to me to buy it.
Okay.
So look, it's all a
Understood.
scam. And look, one other question, and one other thing is this RCS announcement, and why is Cinch running around like they want a ticket to like Wonka Land? Like they got the golden ticket and they're going to meet Willy Wonka. I don't know, but that may be a question for these guys later. But
Well,
look,
it's
I
positioning to
just,
the brands. It's like, you want RCS? We got RCS.
yeah, I don't know what that means. Like what Google and Apple are going to be nice to everybody? Guys, insane. Um, but look, the carriers are going to hide behind Google and Apple in the USA. Messaging will not be regulated. They won't have the headaches of voice. So hats off to the mobile operators to giving it to them in the United States.
Yeah.
Rest of the world, we've got these two gentlemen on. So I'd like to announce Kevin Grant first. Kevin, we did a podcast to say goodbye to him. One of the finest people in the industry. Everybody knows it. Um, been in there. Nobody knows the business as well as him or as well. He's been there. He started with all these guys, and he's just a stand-up guy. And then we also have Daniel Gill from AugNet, who he had on a while back, which I still can't understand why everybody's not, using his product if they're complaining about artificially inflated traffic. So, look, say hello, Kevin. Say hello, Daniel, and let's just get into it's teaching us about artificially inflated traffic.
Well, thanks for the intro, Johnny. Nice to be on your show. I'm one of the many people who've watched it over the course of the last year or so, and I think the reason that you started the show, or the main reason you started the show, was to indeed tell the truth about what we see in our industry, and provide some qualified comment, I guess, from people who know, many of them much smarter than I am. But I've really enjoyed some of the shows on here. They're entertaining as well, so I hope that I can bring something to the show.
Yeah, and Daniel, you want to kiss our ass a little bit?
Yeah, sure thing. Why not? Yeah, I mean, the industry generally is perceived to be a bit of a commodity, hasn't really evolved that much over some decades now. But the fraudsters have. The creativity with which they're able to strike different deals, and model the structures that enable all manner of nefarious activities. That they tend to be quite advanced thinkers, and the defense against that is still really at ground zero. It's just not really got off the ground. So it's great to see you guys. You in your podcast, you're looking more internationally and looking at the wider impact of the various grey arts that happen in this space.
We're a year late. Elon Musk was like a year ago. He came out. Everybody was scurrying around. I heard about all the dark backroom meetings at meth, them saying they can't stop it. They got to keep going. I know a lot of the players in this. I'm friends with a lot of them. But we're here now. This is episode 1 with artificially inflated traffic. We plan on really getting to the bottom of this. Me and Alan have 2 different views. My view is grandma getting hurt? Because if the brands are just getting hurt, okay, I understand that. And I think, Kevin, in my talking with you, you believe the brands are being defrauded. And to you, that's fraud.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, just on that, for the most part, yeah, the brands are probably paying for the majority of the AIT, and someone else is benefiting from it. And ultimately, as a framework to talk about this subject, I think it's really important to get it clear in your mind who is a direct participant in perpetrating AIT, who is an indirect participant, and then also who stands to benefit, and make sure that when you provide people with a platform to talk about this subject, that you take that into consideration. You take what people say maybe with a pinch of salt rather than at face value, because if you have some skin in the game, then I, to be honest, I'm not going to expect to get the full truth from those individuals.
Exactly.
No, we've been getting a lot of comments and a lot of feedback back and forth, where I've had some prominent people in the industry that are providing gateways and firewalls tell me that it's the brand's fault. It's the brand's fault, and the aggregators are making the money off it. They're basically saying the brands want the lower price, and they understand what they're getting on the gray. Otherwise, they would go all white. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think the issue is that we are not enabling the industry. I mean, I'm not enabling the brands to govern the relationships. There's no way for them to measure a 10-cent route versus a 9.9-cent route. One's a bit cheaper. It's just not possible for them to understand the difference. There's no sort of metric that can be audited. In fact, the 9.9-cent route might well be appearing better quality because of AIT. They're manipulating the statistics that the brand sees. Yeah. So without the tools that enables a brand to self-govern, to self-assess, to self-audit, what have they got? They have to put their trust in the hands of third-party suppliers.
I agree with what Daniel said there. I mean, it's the fact that there is no real regulation or standard by which you can actually hold people to account within this industry does make it difficult. But the argument to start and start to impose that would be a difficult one as well. So I understand that. What I would say is, again, everything's nuanced, so it's no black and white in this situation. We talk about grey for a reason in this industry, and it's not true that the enterprises out there are solely being defrauded here and the ones who end up paying for it and are therefore just innocent bystanders. There are enterprises out there who, if we go back to what I said before, have something to gain from AIT in terms of the generation of new potential users on their platform, which they may well then be able to use to promote their own interests in terms of their growth numbers, whatever they want to communicate to the world. There's a very, very complex set of information you need to consider before you turn I guess some classification around in terms of who's responsible. And so I think to a large degree the enterprises are indirect participants and they suffer, but it's not always the case.
Mm. And Alan, you have a question? Because I got 75.
So maybe let's begin in the beginning, because it's always good to cover some of the basics. So I don't know whether, Daniel or Kevin, you want to just give a brief, here is what AIT is. So we get that covered, because it's always good. People, hear the acronym, but they don't understand the reality of what it means.
Yeah. Should I start, Kevin? And
by all means, two heads are better than one on this one, Daniel.
yeah, I think AIT. Let's call it. It's a product of sorts.
Yes.
It's a way to monetize certain connectivity through a chain, and it has evolved. When we go back to the very beginning of AIT, what you generally saw was the people who were committing the AIT, and for those who might not know, they would go to an app, they would download a high volume of those apps, and part of the sign up process for that app is entering a phone number. We'll send you an SMS to verify that you're a user. So they were just generating lots and lots of fake accounts. And in the very early origins of AIT, it was to pump revenues artificially. They didn't care about the accounts they were generating or the one-time passwords coming to them. They'd typically start on a Friday evening, and over a weekend or over a long holiday period, it would just be a sudden dump of artificial traffic that was billable all up the chain.
Yeah.
And it would be very, very high margin, because when they got that traffic, there was no need for them to send it to a supplier. They knew it was fake traffic. So they're pumping revenues.
Sure.
But as things have evolved, fraudsters now, or AIT instigators, have got a bit more sophisticated. The likelihood of them just pumping high volumes of AIT is the likelihood of that's much, much lower. What they tend to do now is they receive that one-time password via SMS, and then they activate the account. And why would they do that? It's to manipulate the perceived quality from the brand. So if I were a CPaaS provider and I wanted to improve the perceived quality of mine in the industry, I could do a small amount of AIT, a couple of % of the traffic, and I'd get a couple of % improvement in my stats. Meanwhile, my competitors who might get a share of this same traffic, their stats, their conversion rate would go down a couple of %. So it has evolved over the time, and it's as much used, if not more used, for manipulation of quality perception as it is for margin or revenue pumping.
Gotcha.
Some great insight there, particularly on the latter part there, Daniel. I think a couple of things to say. First of all, I think we're past the heyday of AIT in terms of volume of transactions that it impacts, partly because of the way that SMS volumes are changing, but also because the spike that was COVID and the spike in terms of the usage and in terms of the motivation for fraudsters to manipulate that particular peak for the industry. we're not going to see it for quite some time, and the industry will look very different. The messaging industry, the A to P industry, not just SMS, but applications person in general, will change quite a lot. So that's one thing I would add to what Daniel said. And then the other thing I would say is that I suspect that and we're going to get into this, I think, that the real kind of growth was initiated by commercial models that were put in place with between mobile network operators and aggregators or CPaaS players. Because the first phase of what Daniel is talking about was really what poured petrol on this, in terms of a combination of commitments and the ability to increase the price paid per SMS to be put in the hands of the aggregators, the CPaaS players, rather than the mobile network operators themselves. And I think if you look at this, the hockey stick in terms of growth on AIT, that would probably be around 2016, 2017, I would have said.
And it's the hockey stick as far as the amount of down payments that people would have to give the operators, no?
Yeah, I mean, that was just one mechanism. There was so many different mechanisms to execute those exclusive deals.
But isn't the main driver how much are you paying me up front?
No, I don't think so. I think ultimately the price, it doesn't matter how they pay, when they pay, the price that the MNO could book in terms of the overall book of business for the year, based on some kind of commitment, some kind of bidding process. Ultimately, all that does is start to bring revenue hungry CPaaS players closer to their risk appetite and a review on their risk position. And when they want to push it harder, then you push harder. You're going to include or start to introduce nefarious kind of activities.
Well, and in the U.S., on the U.S. side, we know this. I know this for a fact. Twilio has prepaid over $100 million that I know of for some of these firewall companies and provided deposits for them. They do that basically to hire their cost of goods sold in their books. We've been covering Twilio for a long time now, and the shenanigans and on what they do in their stock price, kind of shows it. So you have a company in the USA that's saying, okay, here, well, Tintech, for instance, there was a big press release with Tintech where Tintech was saying, hey, send all your traffic to Twilio. What is that? What is that?
Well, that's just a simple part of the process, to be honest. So when an exclusivity is signed with a mobile operator, then part of the process is about communicating to the industry, who may all be buying directly, not usually, but you might have 20, 30, 40, 50 customers who are buying directly. They're no longer enabled to buy for that particular category of traffic, international usually, and they then have to buy directly from the exclusive gateway. So there needs to be some comms both from the mobile operator and from the CPaaS player to explain to the industry that you have to buy through that exclusive bidding winner. But also the other thing to say, Johnny, is that of course Twilio are a US business, but I don't think any of the commitments that they would make or prepayments would have been linked to the US market, which, by the way, I know a lot less about than I do the international market. It would have probably been more likely. It would have been
they're all for international, but they're still burying their cost of goods sold. Correct. and then running traffic off, which on a lot of those deals, they don't even run off for a period of time and then get the money back. It's a different conversation that we're having. I was just curious. So, because you're talking about how this phenomenon exploded, right?
Yeah.
And so you're saying there's because you've got all these companies that, we build firewalls, we protect their networks. So, like, I'll use an example with AT&T. So AT&T in Mexico hires Tintech to protect their network. It's just insane to me.
Well, one of the dynamics that's changed with AIT is the accessibility to AIT. And what I mean by that is now, if a account manager at a struggling CPaaS company, if they had a range of accounts, a portfolio of accounts they were looking after, flow traffic 5% of certain destinations here and there. If they were so inclined, that account manager could, out of their own pocket with their own credit card, go to, frankly, AIT as a service and for 1,000, 2,000 euros, pounds, dollars, or whatever, they can generate just enough traffic where their customers who are sending them 5% start to see, oh, hang on, this provider with 5% of the traffic, their quality is actually better. Okay, it's an artificial metric. It's being manipulated. But the point is that nowadays, with your credit card, an account manager can look like the hero of their for their employer, and also they're getting a kickback from the AIT software vendors. So every $1,000 spent, they're going to get more than that back from from the AIT software vendors. So
Yeah.
accessibility has changed, and it's a different group of users that are now doing it. They're typically a lot more so employees. It's not an executive policy
Yeah.
per se to go the AIT route. It's people piloting their own desks as employees, as account managers, and so on.
Yeah. It's size hustle. They just made it so easy that basically you can set it up. Yeah, as you say, you know you're going to spend 1 to 2K, and by the end of the week, month, you're going to see 3 to 4K coming back.
And you're going to look like a hero to the rest of your team and your employer.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus your bonus as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go on, Johnny.
No, you go ahead. You're on tangent. I have some other things.
No, and the other perceived win is from the customer. Some of those excessive margins that they're making through AIT can then be used to subsidize the rates. So the customers are looking at this supplier that last month was getting 5% of the traffic, and that's now gradually increasing. And this supplier that they look to be cheaper because some of those rates are now subsidized. The quality looks to be better. It's been manipulated.
Yeah.
And going back to what Kevin was saying, actually, I think this was before the call, but the rate per message is cheaper, but the annual budget ends up increasing. And no one's any wiser until the enterprises are in a position where they can audit the suppliers and compare like for like. They're just not empowered to be able to tell the difference and garner this insight.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why wouldn't the GSMA? Why wouldn't the GSMA? Because the other organizations, obviously, you give them enough money, they don't care. Whoever gives them the most money, they're going to stand behind those people because they're paying their bills. They're paying the catering hall fees. But we had Robert Viz on recently, and a lot of this stuff comes from him. His view of AIT and the companies doing it, and the reason why he didn't get into it is because to him they're criminals. So he calls them point blank criminals. Those are his words. And here's a guy that's taken in over $1 billion from the market. His companies, he's giving away messaging or blending it or giving some kind of a free equation. He believes it's all over with RCS and Google. He's made $1 billion bet on a different direction. Why wouldn't the GSMA? Because he mentioned this thing in the podcast about meth, and 5 years ago, you couldn't get carrier connections unless you were in meth, which I found insane. I didn't even know that. And how does a tracer organization that's really international? It's in the UK. How are they making rules in the United States for anybody? I don't really think they are. And my conversations with them, I don't think meth has. I mean, they come out and say we have a code of conduct, but what does that really mean? It's just going to go along with everybody else. But the GSMA, like Viz says, is real. Why wouldn't GSMA come to AugNet, or have you thought about going to the GSMA and saying, look, we have this problem in the industry. I can solve all these problems. I can create a platform or enterprise or whatever to bring back credibility, to know who you're dealing with. Or am I just nuts? Because I'm not understanding.
Do you mean something like the campaign registry, or just like the second version of that?
Oh, no, you didn't say the campaign registry, did you?
Sorry, Daniel.
That was actually pretty funny.
I couldn't resist, Johnny. I knew someone was going to say it, so I thought I'd get it there.
Could the GSMA mandate governance as a requirement to stop all these nefarious activities?
I mean, ultimately, that was the founding vision for Orgnet to be that accreditation service,
Yeah.
to be that kite mark, to put sort of power into the hands of enterprises and anyone in the supply chain to validate whatever suppliers they're using. What types of routes were in use? Has the message landed? And most importantly, is the user at the far end? Is it an authenticated user? Is it a real mobile phone in the hands of a real person who really wants to use this app? Um, so yeah, I think what the industry has always lacked is a technological response to that. It's all very well having some sign up declaration,
Yeah.
but speaking very frankly, anyone can sign that and
Yeah.
not have anything enforced against them.
Exactly.
How, and then that also doesn't help the vendors. If a vendor, if a big app corporate out there, they've got no visibility about what happens to the traffic after they've handed it off to their CPaaS vendor.
Yep.
So that there really has to be this sort of throughout the entire supply chain, there really has to be a governance model.
Yeah.
And our vision for that was to have a digital receipt throughout the chain,
Yeah.
and ended up on an authenticated device. So could someone a governing body of sorts enforce it?
They could absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to think so. I would also I think, as with anything that sort of network effect, one of the definitions of a network effect is the more people on that network, the more powerful it becomes.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely the case here. Once you've got one or two key brands in the industry saying we can only deal with you if it's via this accredited path, or we're going to get this encrypted receipts at the end, it then becomes a chaos multiplier.
Yeah.
It's the people who are not acting within that safe ecosystem that start to gradually get ejected out of the supply chain. It's not that meaningful for only one app to do this by themselves.
Exactly.
So it does take a bit of a movement, a bit of a consortium, a bit of a get that inertia moving from a bit of a group effort.
And we see it in industries like banking. I mean, they have governance models. So, I mean, it's not unknown. But from your perspective, Kevin, is it too late? Is it doable? I mean, because we've got now RCS coming in, there's all the IP messaging services that are growing. I mean, if we're in Japan, it's line, it's not SMS. So just, from your perspective, is it too late? Is it viable? Is even the GSMA, a viable method? Because they always get very sensitive about commercial issues. So I'm just interested in your perspective on, is this just a pipe dream?
So this is an interesting one. So first of all, one of you might maybe be able to correct me, but I don't think the GSMA has ever regulated any part of the telecoms industry. I think the permanent reference documents, the PRDs that they produced going back 20, 30 years.
And you can't provide SIMs without being GSMA accredited.
Okay, so actually, so there you go. So I think you may have just come back with an example where they have done, but
that's the only one I know of.
It's a very, very simplistic model to implement.
Yeah.
This is a long way down the line. Okay, we're 30 years plus into the lifespan of SMS, and a lot of the businesses out there that have the greatest knowledge, technical, operational, commercial capability have got networks that have an amalgamation of so many different other organizations after lots and lots of M&A activity over the course of the last 15, 20 years, that the complexity within this process would be would be immense. Now, that's not a reason not to do it, Alan, but when you combine that with the fact that the margins are pretty tight, right, in the SMS world, which is one of the reasons why, you know, all of the big guys have experienced margin squeeze.
Not the
And
gateway companies. Their margins aren't tight.
well, I would argue that they're still pretty tight. They'll probably run out of money.
I've seen plenty of books,
I'm
and I
sure.
see their margins are 10, 15% higher than regular aggregator margins.
I'm sure. But if there's some smart cooperation within the industry, it would only take 6 months for those businesses to run out of money, and we can talk about building a stable and sustainable business long term later on in the call. But I don't think that's too difficult to actually address if the kind of work that you guys are doing here and everyone else in the industry who has the right intent can get to work on this. But Alan, to your point, I do believe it's possible, and I think the reason why something has to be done is because we're moving into A2P 3.0, 4.0, whatever you want to call it, with the arrival on a serious arrival of RCS. I know it's been around a long time. We've all had lots of false dawns on it, but it genuinely is upon us now. That doesn't mean SMS is going to die. It means that there's a new A2P messaging and cloud communications kind of landscape to design and to control. So, and there's lots of great businesses out there who have the capability to do that and the patience to do that, but they have to slow down on their revenue expectations. They have to accept that they're all part of building an ecosystem that can create fantastic interaction between the world's most important businesses and us, the consumers. And more importantly, our kids, because that's where it's heading, right? And you know, RCS and all of the new messaging channels are going to give a much better customer experience. But when you put all that together, and I also see Johnny kind of just about to talk about spamming grandma because I've said it for 5 minutes.
No, I'm actually talking. I just got RCS yesterday.
Yeah.
I have Verizon, I just got it. I did my Apple, you know, whatever, put the Apple together. I did the new iOS update, and it's 100 times better.
Well, look, Johnny, it's an amazing experience. I mean, I played with RCS a few years ago, and it is a really, you know, it's an experience of its
But
time.
why wouldn't Google and Apple care about all? I mean, Google, obviously, every brand in the world, they make their money off search. They own YouTube. I mean, Facebook would be nothing without owning WhatsApp.
They
But
should do.
Instagram.
They should do. But let's go back to the GSMA. GSMA don't stand to gain anything out of providing some kind of regulatory position on this and some guidelines, and hopefully some guidelines with teeth. Apple and Google do. So let's forget them as being anyone who should ever be anywhere near rule setting for this new world that I've described.
Yeah.
Well, so, let's forget GSMA and let me call out Cinch. I'll tell you why. Robert Gershman is the chairman of Cinch, right? He's a chairman of Meth, right? So Meth has this code of conduct. Everybody's joined Meth. Spinniverse has even joined Meth. Julio's joined Meth.
They haven't all joined that code of conduct. I can tell you. Well, first of all, and I refuse to call him the Viz, but Robert hasn't. Robert and Bird haven't joined there. And I can give you an example from a previous employer of mine going back.
No, not him. He don't count. He's not the Viz. I'm talking Robert Gershman. Robert Gershman Cinch.
Johnny, I know, but you're saying that everyone is a part of that organisation. They're not. And Robert Gershman will probably, well, you might not remember this, but a number of years ago, I sat on the call and said, I can't sign this code of conduct. And I was very honest because I knew that at the time, the traffic that I was transiting, some of it was grey and some of it would have contravened the rules that were in that. Now, that was an inevitability and something that I was more than happy to explain to a consortium of people on the call because it's part of the ecosystem, grey traffic. So I didn't agree with the terminology in there. I understood the reason for it, but I said, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of people on here who signed up to this who are already contravening this, and I'm not prepared to do that. So there's a number of people out there in the industry and organisations who aren't part of that. But to your point about Robert and MEF, Robert's elected. So it's, and he doesn't stand to gain anything out of it. Of course, he's going to come at it with his Cinch hat on. But the MEF is a really okay catering hall. There's some of your points of view that I've always said, Johnny, I completely agree with. But there's also elements of what the MEF does that are hugely positive, and they encourage good discussion about this. So far, hasn't come up with any solutions. So and that's
No,
the issue.
I always said at the beginning, I have no problem with MEF other than, one guy taking payoffs to do a hit job on my partner on the campaign registry, which we'll find out to be true. Otherwise, the members of the MEF, a lot of these companies are great. I like the whole environment of companies getting together and discussing things. My whole point is, how do you get a product like Augnet, which the brands would want to know, I believe. So you really, how would Kevin Graham take Augnet and a product that would help clean things up to market? How would you do it?
How would I take it to market, or how would I deploy it if we
How
signed a
would you
partnership?
get it? How would you get it accepted? Because obviously nobody wants to see how much they weigh on the scale.
Uh, well, look, here's the thing. Daniel and I have spoken since Augnet was founded. Fantastic idea, coming from absolutely the right place, and visionary in many aspects. In reality, it coincided with the most tumultuous period this industry has ever faced. And also, I think this is the most important thing, everyone was running towards revenue. No one invests in a compliance model. No one invests in our industry. If you look at banking, you talked about banking before, Alan.
Yeah.
The compliance industry is based on the finance industry because they have to spend probably half of their OPEX on compliance.
Yes.
In our industry, we don't have to spend anything. Anything.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, maybe you've got maybe telecoms lines and the compliance requirements that come with it, but in comparative terms, it's nothing.
Yeah.
So, Johnny, to answer your question, no one is going to spend an inordinate amount of time on implementing a really, really smart technical solution unless there's a reason to do so. Now, Daniel probably has had traction, and I know he's had traction in certain parts of the market where you've had a combination of the right ethics, not maybe publicly held businesses, really, really charging that revenue, and therefore just simply not having the time to implement something that really does take time. It takes a partnership, takes two parties within the partnership to implement, and then to maintain. You don't just install or implement a solution and then walk away and hope that everything's done. I know a lot of people have done that, but that's why they don't work.
Yeah.
So sorry, I'll let you go in.
Yeah, well, I think one of the mistakes that Augnet made early on was that it turns out we were trying to sell something that our prospects didn't know they needed, and that's the hardest thing to sell. You've got to convince them that there's a problem, and that's not when you're trying to build that into the sales cycle, that's not a small feat.
Yeah.
So we wasted a lot of time pitching to a lot of the wrong people whose motivations at the time, as you've said or alluded to there, Kevin, it wasn't about compliance. It remained around cost efficiencies. And we were threatening to take some of those efficiencies away, but by ensuring a certain grade or quality of service was met. In more recent times, I think there is now a tailwind of sort of compliance, and there's been some security issues, data leaks. So I think this sort of question around compliance and people perhaps trying to be sold something they didn't know they needed, I think those have started shifting, because in the last year particularly, I would say it's been more notable that let's say 2 years ago, cold outreach for us, just direct to enterprise, just wasn't really working. We weren't getting any response. What we then started doing was doing more education-based, thought leadership pieces, and the people that resonated, the people who sort of liked those pieces, they started reaching out to us. And again, more recently, we've started in the last sort of 3-4 months, we've started outreach again, and we're getting quite a different response to what we were getting, I don't know, let's say 18 months ago. even though our content and the methods we go about is broadly the same, but I just think the acceptance and the knowledge around fraud, AIT in particular, um, it's just more widespread now. And one of the things we've not touched on yet is AIT. Is that where the fraud stops? Actually, no. A lot of the people doing AIT, that the real
Yeah.
instigators of AIT, are now receiving amongst the traffic. There's authentic SMS traffic, and they're selling that content
Yeah.
in real time via APIs.
Yeah.
And I can go on. It takes me about 40 seconds or so to go to certain dark corners of the web, and I can buy real time, one time passwords from a large number of apps.
Yeah.
And the point of that, a lot of people might say their knee jerk reaction is, well, who the hell would care if my Deliveroo password got leaked to someone? Well, the power of that is, if, as a fraudster, if I got that one time password at the same time, I would wait 30 seconds and then call that person up. I've got your phone number and I've got your content. And I would say, hey, I'm from Deliveroo. My name's Dan. We see you're trying to activate your app at the moment. For verification purposes, the one-time password we've just sent you is 5678. We think you've done a typo in your credit card because your payment is in this hung status. Let me
Absolutely.
take you through security. I've got you
Yeah.
sorted. That is where I believe the real threat of AIT is.
Yeah.
AIT itself, the damage really is to the brands, and a lot of brands don't seemingly care about that. Believe me, I've been pitching them to them for a long time, and we've not been able to convince them they've got a real problem there.
Yeah.
I think when data like that, when their one-time password content is getting leaked and their customers are getting defrauded, and the source of those leaks can then be identified, I think companies are going to have to take this much more seriously, and they're duty bound to. Most of
Yeah.
these companies are
Well, now
signed
you
up
just
to.
went to a place that really matters. This is what we care about here. So
Mm,
recently in the US, you've got these new fraudsters that are trying to trick people into, secret questions. What was your first dog? Where did you first live? And they're trapping people that way. So you're talking about, people selling data. So now you're going to a different say. So, okay, brands are getting beat. Who's getting hurt? But now you're talking about, so these firewall companies that are saying, I'm going to block AT&T Mexico. I'm going to block Philippines. So you're saying these companies now are potentially selling the data, right?
yeah,
On
and
individuals.
Yes.
yeah, and by the way, at
There's
three
the smoking
euros
gun, Alan.
per SMS,
Yeah.
per SMS. So if I were so inclined, I could give SMS away for free and make far much more money on. I'm not committing the fraud. I'm selling the
No. Yeah.
data.
Yeah.
But when you've got a very convincing confidence when you've got a one-time password to verify yourself,
Yeah.
your ability to commit that fraud is,
Exactly.
it's significantly higher.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the average case per fraud. It varies tremendously
Yes.
depending on countries and demographics and so
Yeah.
on. But it's still in some of the smaller developing countries. But people who have a smartphone, who are using apps, have credit cards,
Yeah.
it's still in the thousands of
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
euros
Well,
or dollars per
in
fraud.
robocalling, it's $451 per incident. So that's so it's significant, but we're way over time. I know there's some
No, look, I think
jarringly
I
old
think this is
swearing.
great. Serious information here.
Yeah.
Look, as I know, I used to talk to Kevin all the time, and he would beat me up on certain analysis I'd have across the board. But he cares. He cares about people. So, and so does so Daniel. Of course, he's built a whole product around us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we got to go down this rabbit hole a little bit more.
Yep.
And look, I thank you both for coming on, and I hope you're going to come back because look, we beaten it up in the USA as far as we have the biggest epidemic in the world as far as pure spam, bar none. And everybody wants to rob Americans because Americans are the dumbest. They love to hand away their money for free all over the place. But this is important. And a lot of people want to hear about it. So
Yeah,
thank you,
absolutely.
Kevin, and thank you, Daniel.
Yeah,
And hopefully
excellent
you
work,
guys
man.
will come back because we're
It's
going
a
to start
pleasure.
beating this up.
We will. We will.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Just one final point on Dan, what Daniel said there, just quickly. I know we're over time, but Alan, in answer to your question, maybe Daniel's suggestion there is the way to go about it, because privacy, cybersecurity, and
Yes.
regulation and penalties around that
Yes.
may well focus the mind a little bit, and I think you're onto something there. So that's a conversation for another day.
Yep.
But I like where you're headed with that,
But
Daniel.
that's an important conversation coming from somebody like you who's been in the trenches and been disturbed by this. And I'm trying to find an angle on how to put this in there. I didn't realize a lot of the stuff with the dark web and how important this is. This just changes the game. So anybody that's telling you to look the other way really, might be doing
Yeah.
some of this.
We don't have to look in the industry for regulation. ISO 27001, the whole premise of that is if there is a risk that your customer data is getting leaked, you have to take action.
Exactly.
So, there are other bodies that could be enforcing this.
Yep.
But yeah, there we go. That maybe
That's
there's
a good
Well, we
point.
got we got to bring awareness. Once you bring awareness, you can solve things.
Yeah.
And without
Yep.
awareness, so we got to start bringing awareness, truth and telecom style,